Hello viewers, my name is Kayode Ajiboye, Independent TV. Here with me is Mr. McDonald Onyema, a tax analyst and in fact an expert in financial discourse. He's here to enlighten us about the value-added tax VAT and then the tax identification number TIN, otherwise called TIN. He's here to shed more light on it so that we all be educated on it. Thank you, Mr. Onyema. You're welcome.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine.
Right. Now, what do you think is the reason for the sudden approach of government in deciding that there should be an increase in value-added tax VAT from 5% to 7.5%?
Well, to start with, a lot of thought could have gone into that, and a lot of factors could have been considered. I mean, to start with, Nigeria came into a phase whereby by the tail end of 2019, we were just recovering from the recession of 2018. And then for a country that is largely dependent on oil and gas, and we saw a lot of price instability in that sector too, things going up and down, then OPEC coming to intervene and all. So, I mean, a lot of factors could have contributed to the decision by the federal government to increase VAT from 5 to 7.5%. But whichever way, one thing is certain, that is the fact that they think there is a need to increase the revenue for the government. Remember, Nigeria is hugely in debt presently. The debt burden on the nation is large. And then with a budget running into trillions of naira, there has to be alternative sources of funding that budget apart from the already overburdened oil and gas sector. So I think the major reason is the need to increase government revenue.
Given the recent or once a ongoing, let's use recent is more appropriate. Okay. About the minimum wage, so to say.
Okay.
I don't want to say so called. It's like a lot of Nigerians are looking at it as somebody who is giving the carrot to the child and at the same time holding a cane at the other hand. That okay, if we insist, we must increase your salary, then we must have a way of getting it back. Whereas inflation is still there, opening his mouth to go up whatever increment you think you are given. And meanwhile, many states, even there is no assurance that the federal has started paying. For many federal workers are still saying they've not seen anything.
Well, while that thought process is very valid, right? But then economics is not that lean. So we really cannot say the government is increasing minimum wage from 18,000 to 36,000 and then increasing VAT by 50% to, even though that will be a kind of net effect in the sense that this increased by almost 50% and this one also increased by 50%. So you discover that for those who are of that opinion, they may not be wrong, but I know that there is more to it. I mean, economics is not that lean. It's not a case, it should be quite microscopic. If we narrow it down to just saying that VAT was increased to manage the impact of increasing salary of workers. I mean, I agree with you that there are better ways that this could have managed, given the fact that countries are even exploring less tax burdens to be able to encourage investments and FDIs into their nations. I agree with you that we could have explored better options. We could have taken the option of trying to probably cut down on the cost of governance as a way of cost saving. I mean, those are valid options that we could have explored.
All right, Onyema, you mentioned impact. Impact on the masses, and then do you think positive or negative?
Well, when there is an increase in VAT, definitely the cost of living goes high. So on the masses, it is definitely going to be negative. The burden is going to be a lot. Come to think about it, VAT is a consumption tax, the consumer's tax. At the end of the day, the consumers bear the cost burden. So what that means is that even with the inflation that's already on ground, your purchasing power keeps getting lower and lower, irrespective of how much you earn, right? So the impact on the masses is negative. It's negative.
And if the impact is negative on the masses, uh, and looking at what we think government should do vis-a-vis what we've been seeing uh, better governed societies do to their nationals. What do you think Nigerians would expect from this? How do you think we will react given the history that we have had things like this without any effective cushioning effect?
This is what it is, right? It has happened, is that it has happened. So we should shift our emphasis, we should shift our focus towards demanding more from the government. I mean, if you've increased VAT from 5% to 7.5%, my expectation should be that in terms of infrastructural development, we should have a corresponding increase in the structures you're putting on ground in terms of building basic amenities. We should have a corresponding increase in better welfare packages for workers at the federal level and at the state levels. We should have a corresponding increase in terms of welfare generally.
What do you think ideally? What do you think the VAT accruing to government, whatever gain they call it, what do you think it should be used for?
If you increase VAT, you increase taxes on people, and then you are not getting value for the taxes you're paying, it then becomes a burden. And that is when you then begin to have conversations about people rising up against government and all that. Those are some of the things that trigger it. I mean, if I'm paying taxes, the natural law of give and take demands that I should see something. I should have proofs from the government that my taxes are being utilized. We must be bold enough to say no to using the taxpayers' money to fund the excessive greed of a few. I mean, these are some of the things we expect the government to look into in this new era.
Okay, closely related to that, and I think it's going to be an attractive kind of distraction. The TIN thing.
Okay.
Could you educate us a little on it? What do you think it's all about? How does it affect the average Nigerian?
Okay, the taxpayers identification number. It's a number issued by the tax authority for to every taxpayer in Nigeria. So basically, it is to be able to track the fact that to track individuals and companies to ensure that they are paying their taxes and their tax records are up to date, right? Now, over time, we are aware that a large percentage of Nigerians are not really interested in paying taxes. So, what the government has done as a measure is to try to integrate bank accounts to tax identification number of both individuals and businesses. As at the moment, those of businesses, it has been on. I mean, before you get a bank account as a registered business in Nigeria, you're supposed to present your TIN. Now, but what the Finance Act has done is to legalize it. It's to document it, right? So it's not as if it's a practice that is new. It has been there. But what has happened now is that in the new Finance Act that has just been signed into law and all, we've seen that the government it has been documented there that it's a prerequisite to run a bank account as an organization. Now, so the whole idea of it is to be able to ensure that nobody escapes the tax net. I mean, that is the only reason they are determined to actually synchronize your bank account numbers to your TIN is to ensure that before you can carry out any transaction via the bank, that this person is actually captured under the tax net and this person is a taxpayer in Nigeria.
Yeah, that is fair. In fact, almost palpable among people that maybe in the next few days, specifically from February 1, that you can't access your, one will not be able to access his bank account. How do you think that is true?
Well,
Is it likely to be
that fear is valid.
okay?
That fear is valid, and the reason is because, like I said earlier, it has been documented in the New Finance Act. Then again, we've seen various state governments trying to uh, launch various campaigns to generate taxpayer ID. I mean, the Lagos State Internal Revenue Service has been on that very
Yeah.
recently. I mean, they are trying to get everyone to register on their e-tax online platform, and then they are generating taxpayer ID for everyone and all. So at the federal level, I'm aware that such measure too is in place. But then whether it's going to take effect from 1st February, I cannot speak to that because so far I've also seen that they are having a bit of skirmishes, network issues, and all in trying to. They've had some valid challenges in trying to make this happen, and they try to get as much number of persons into to generate that thing for the number of taxpayers that they are targeting. So I can't really speak to the fact that February 1 will be the commencement date for that particular aspect. With time, I expect that the FRS and the State Board of Internal Revenues, I expect that they will release circulars to that effect, probably give extensions and all, and then encourage more persons to register for that online thing generation, whatever that way.
Sorry, from an expert point of view, what positive benefit do you think this increment in VAT will be to the average Nigerian?
Yeah, well, it depends on where you are sitting. As a Nigerian citizen, if I have this level of trust in my government, I would have said, well, with an increase in VAT, I expect, like I mentioned earlier, that they will be empowered more financially to put the necessary infrastructures in place to ensure that Nigeria works the way it should work, right? But with the experiences we've had in the past, it is quite difficult to speak to that. So the truth is, I must confess, I'm one of those masses. So really, I don't expect much. I don't expect much. I mean, I just want to be optimistic that the government will do what they should do with the money. And I mean, increased taxes means that they have more. They are getting more from the public. So they should invest more in building the society.
The VAT issue is just
It's just one.
one of the aspects
Yeah.
of the finance bill signed into law by the president.
President.
What are the things you foresee? What are the foreseeable benefits generally therefrom
From the
finance bill?
finance bill holistically.
Eh,
Okay, well, so the finance bill actually touched so many other aspects of tax, and it actually addressed some of the issues we were having in the CETA, the PPTA, and I mean, so it actually looked so. For instance, before now, the CETA actually taxes companies at 30%, and then where your taxable profit is not up to a certain level, where your taxable profit is not big enough, there's what they call minimum tax. It applies. But I mean, all that has been addressed right now. So what the finance bill has done is to try to encourage small businesses to come into the tax net, and what it has done is to exempt small businesses whose turnover is between 0 and 25 million from taxes. So for those kind of businesses, you don't have any tax burden to bear. That's under the SITA. In terms of VAT, the same thing. Where your taxable supplies are not up to 25 million naira annually, you really don't have any output VAT. You don't have that tax burden to pay. So I think that the act has encouraged entrepreneurs and small businesses to do more. So from a tax rate of 30% flat, we now have a graduated scale of 0%, and then 20% for companies between whose revenue run between 25 million to 100 million. And then for the guys, the big companies with revenue above 100 million, they will still be paying at 30%. So I think it's a good time for small businesses in Nigeria. That is one of the things that this the finance bill has done. On the other part, before now, there have been a lot of issues and conversations around uh, capturing digital transactions under the tax net. So, and I mean, we've always resorted to the court to settle some of those issues. And the clear example is the Vodacom case versus FIRS, you know. But with this new finance act, there's been a bit of clarity on how to go about taxing digital transactions. So that is another good thing to talk about. Then non-resident companies too. There's been an issue about at what point will VAT apply when services are provided by companies that are not resident in Nigeria. You know, we've had cases and then we've had arguments up and down where some are saying, okay, the origin principle should apply, while others are of the view that the destination principle should apply. You know, but what the Finance Act has done is to actually clarify on that, saying that irrespective of where the where the services are being provided from, so long as there is there's what it described as significant economic presence, even though the act did not expressly speak much about it, but it is expected that the finance minister and her team will come up with a definition of what that economic presence actually means. But then let me just backtrack a bit. Before now, we have the concept of the fixed base in trying to deal with non-resident companies. So we say, okay, when a company establishes a fixed base in Nigeria, profits attributable to that fixed base will be taxable, right? Will be captured under tax. Now, at what point will you say a company has established a fixed base? The law then went ahead to say, okay, when there is a representative of the company concluding business transactions on behalf of the company, when there is transactions that are not at arm's. So a lot of factors came into play, right? But it's the major thing is that it suggested that physical presence, was a major factor in determining fixed base. But what this finance bill has done is to say that, I mean, you don't necessarily need to be physically present in Nigeria, because, say for instance, an Airbnb can sit somewhere in San Francisco, concluding transactions in Nigeria, booking hotels for people and all that, right? And then you really can't. I mean, they've not come into Nigeria, so you really can't trace or track or even speak to the fact that that business is actually going on. So what they've done is to say, you know what, for such businesses that are concluded digitally in the digital space, so long as we can actually prove that a level of profit was made from Nigeria as a result of that sustained transaction, even though it happened digitally, you must give us that. So I think it's a good one. It has provided clarification on that. And then there has been a long-standing war between NIPOST and FIRS on who collects stamp duties.
Stamp duty.
Right? So, I mean, the Finance Act has also provided clarification on that. They have said that the FIRS is actually, the FIRS and the State Board of Internal Revenues should be the board in charge of the collection of stamp duty. So, if you look at it from a holistic perspective, I mean, there are some good aspects of the law of the Finance Act that, if well handled administratively, will actually help ramp up the revenue that the government is interested in increasing. But then there are still some other aspects that we are still very skeptical about.
Professionally, thank you for this night posting you brought. From the insight of professional experience, don't you think night post should rather be in charge of stamp duty?
Well, that it has that a thing has been the way it is in the past doesn't really make it right. From my own views, and this is strictly my own views, right? For it defeats the aim of accountability when you begin to have different bodies in charge of collecting different revenues that speak that almost speak to the same thing. Stamp duty on its own, it may not be. It's an indirect. It's a kind of tax. So night posts should
Tax on
concentrate
something.
on
I
something.
thought it's supposed to be tax on a freighting kind of material
Well,
that moves and which
on
nipples.
instruments,
Okay.
on instruments, the law didn't say freighting materials. It talked about instruments. It talked about instruments and then documents and documentations and all. So basically, I think it is a valid decision. The important thing is there is a level of clarity now on who should collect those taxes, right? I mean, if NIPOS was doing it in the past and the law is now saying FRS should do it, I can't fight the law. I can't fight the law.
No, thank you. We are Nigerian. We are Nigerians. So the Nigerian factor now, if you want to see it again as your personal view, I don't mind. Don't you think this VAT thing, TI thing, is another fidelity test on accounting professionals? Accountants are called to do internal, external auditing and auditing, and we've had it. We have even published. It's not about grapevine information. We have had really popular companies doing two books to evade tax. Now you have an increment in tax now. Then it's about you. You are my accountant. You protect my interest because I'm paying you for this moment for the job you are doing for me, and you want to do what favors me. Don't you look at it that now the fidelity of an accounting professional will be called to play now, knowing that yes, per business it is going to be like this, going to be from 5 to 7.5, and added to the bill is going to pay me. Why won't I help him do the books so that he will pay less? Given that it is even the big businesses that have all the chances to do all this, and the average businessman there is being ripped up in the name of VAT. Do you think
Okay,
professionals should now come
to start with, in even in the accounting professional, there is a demand on you as a professional to be ethical. And also there is a concept now known as responsible taxation. So it places a demand on you to be tax responsible. I mean, such that at any point in time, you can be held accountable for your taxes and you will come out clean. Now, I mean, I cannot. I mean, this is Nigeria, right? And there may be instances or issues like the one you described, but then I'm not aware of it. But I know that when you look at the tax law as it's here, there are very legal tax planning measures that can be adopted to manage taxes at organizational or individual levels. I mean, those things are within the ambits of the law. And if you understand tax as it is, and you understand those loopholes in the law, yeah, then tax avoidance will really not be an option for you. You can take advantage of the gaps in the laws to manage your tax exposures. And that's, I tell you, is acceptable in any sphere globally.
yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've had it all from an expert, a financial analyst. He has educated us. In fact, he has tutored us on the, we don't want to say nagging issue of VAT and TIN. We heard much from him, and we hope you are educated. Thank you very much.